Welcome back to my channel, and I just wanted to do a little intro to a series that I'm going to be going through on Simplify3D, using with Monoprice Maker Ultimate 3D printer. So I'm going to do in the future here a screen recording of all of my settings for the different filaments to try to help people out get started. You should be able to convert these settings over to Simplify3D, to Cure. I don't know exactly, I just know that I upgraded from Cure to Simplify3D. I'm not sponsored by them or anything like that. I paid for this copy myself, and through lots of trial and error, I think I've come up with some pretty good base settings. But I'm going to go over just what each setting does in Simplify3D. Now this is going to be what I've picked up, what I've learned does what. It's not going to be every single setting, but probably the ones that you're going to do the most adjusting on. So the first thing you're going to want to do is, if you're going to match up my settings, you're going to need to go up here to Tools and Options, and you're going to need to change this to millimeters per second instead of millimeters per minute. I noticed that the default was millimeters per minute, and I do all mine in millimeters per second. Another thing to note that I just used the Simplify3D setup for the Monoprice 3D printer and used what they had, and then adjusted settings from there. So I'm not going to go through the configuration process. I'm just going to show you, or try to explain, what I understand about different settings in the processes. So the first thing you're going to need to do is add your model. It's very simple. You just hit import, then you can import your model. If your model is not centered, you can hit that center button and put it in the middle. Another feature that I've come to like in here is going up here to View, Edit, and then Place Surface on Bed. So what that does, when you click that, if I want a particular surface, or say my model's upside down, I can select my surface and it will turn it right over to that. If my model is upside down, when I import it like that, you'll go back over here, Place Bed on part on surface, and then bam, and then I'll recenter it, and that seems to work very well for models that are not turned over. So that's probably one good feature. But this is not really about features. This is about trying to get your configuration set up, your processes set up, in order to have successful prints. So the one thing that I did do here is I don't really use these two things right here. I only put them on what filament they are. What I use is Select Profile, and I make up all my different filaments through here. And then as far as quality, I just adjust it depending on what printer I'm using. What print that I'm trying to print, and then so I can just flip through my my different filaments. Now, the reason why I had to do that is because if you just change auto configure for material and print quality, they don't do all of the settings, like your speed. One thing that I noticed was speed, your print speed. It doesn't change that no matter which one of these two you put in, and some filaments just can't print as fast as others. So that's the main reason why I used this one up here, and I just save and update as my profiles. Let's say you're on your PLA and you have another profile that you would like to make on PLA. You can just hit Save as New, and then you can name your profile whatever you want to make an adjustment, maybe PLA at 50 millimeters per second. Whatever you'd like to do. I just do per filament, and I've seen that that's been able to make my changing through the different type of filaments a lot faster. So you can set up your profiles how you want. That's just how I do it. The main thing is to try to go through these settings here. So of course you've got your primary extruder, of course the nozzle size on the mono price is 0.40, so that should be pretty standard. Extrusion multiplier, so basically what this does is if 1.0 is how fast your filament is going to be pushed out, that's going to be 100% of normal speed. So on PLA, a lot of the adjustments are, they say to make it extrude just a little bit slower, and 0.90 is the recommendation. But for example, TPU, they say you want to push it out just a little bit faster, so I do a 1.10 on that. But we'll go over them settings later. But mainly what this is for is to kind of control your speed of your flow of your filament through the entire print. So 0.90 would be 90% of the flow. 1.0 would be 100%, and so on. Extrusion width, usually basically what that does is auto will automatically configure. So auto says the extrusion width for a 0.4 millimeter nozzle is 0.48. Well, I usually set this to manual to set what exactly the nozzle is. So basically what I understand that this extrusion width simulates is basically it's telling the slicer that yes, I have a 0.4 millimeter nozzle, but I wanted it to extrude like it has a 0.5 nozzle or whatnot. That's the way I understand that it works. Now, of course, any of these things that I go over, I'm just trying to go off of what I think and understand that they do. So if I am wrong about any of these, if you can leave a comment down below, that would help everyone out. So moving along, I've noticed on this right here, I've got to do a little bit more on PETG. But anyways, this is where I'm at on this one. This is what I understand that does. All right. It may what it does, like it does here. It's saying it's got a bigger nozzle, so in return, it's going to push out a little bit more filament, which will make the width of the filament wider. So, but anyways, moving along. Retraction. Retraction, basically what that does is anytime you have some kind of travel movement that's going to be over open space that is not going to be printing, it basically pulls the filament back up into the nozzle in order to keep it from stringing. What I've found that your best number here of retraction distance is 5.0 millimeters. So you can take it or leave it and just the how much filament you want it to pull back. So every time that a retraction movement happens, it pulls back 5 millimeters of filament, and then when it goes to print again, it pushes that 5 millimeters back in and then starts printing. Retraction start distance, that's a setting I don't really mess with, so we'll move along. Retraction vertical lift, that basically means that it will use the Z-axis, which makes it go up and down, and that's how many millimeters that the Z-axis will go down, and then the movement will happen over open space, and then the Z-axis will go back up. This is the one we're talking about right here. But I feel like that doesn't make a huge difference, and it probably does, but I don't like the extra wear and tear. I mean, that's a lot. If you have a lot of retraction movements, that's a lot up and down on the Z-axis. Retraction speed, basically that says how fast it is going to pull that 5 retraction speed will basically say how fast I am going to pull that 5 millimeters up and then push that 5 millimeters back. So I have 60 millimeters per second. If you want that retraction a little bit faster or slower, you can adjust that number. Coast at the end, right here, which means basically 0.20 millimeters before the extraction movement happens, it will stop feeding material into the nozzle. So basically that gets it just a little bit, basically it forces your print to use that 0.2 millimeters of filament left in your nozzle to print that last bit. So you can adjust that. I would say you can't go too high on that or you won't have any filament on the edges of your models. Nozzle wipe basically means the distance that it's going to travel while it's doing the distance that it's going to travel before the extraction movement happens, which is also not going to feed filament. So yeah, I'm kind of confused a little bit on both of these. I know that they're pretty close in the same. They do small amounts different. This is so, you know, I would say just use both of them, be close to them settings. But you know, there's more research you can do on these two movements here. But these are what I've come up to find that works pretty good. All right, moving along. Layers. So this is your primary layer height. So each layer of your filament, each layer of your print is going to be 0.1 millimeters tall. I think this is pretty close to the minimum that the a monoprice printer can go. So you know, if you want your layers to be thicker, then you'd go up. I would say, you know, that, you know, 2.5 would be about as high as you could go. I usually print at 0.1. I know it takes a little bit longer to print, but I feel like I get closer layers and a better looking model. But you know, if you want to do a fast prototype and you're not planning on using it as a main product, you can put it at like 2.5 and you should be okay. But you know, that'd be up to you. Top solid layer. That means how many full layers are going to be on the top of your model. Bottom solid layers is going to be how many layers of filament's going to be on your bottom. And basically this is before and after infill. So basically it's going to print these 4 layers, and then it's going to start doing infill, and then on the top of your model it's going to print 5 full layers. I've noticed that your top layers have to be a little bit more, especially if you're printing over supports, in order to fill in that empty space, because that first layer is not gonna be a good solid layer. So you can adjust these depending on how high of a quality of print you want to do. The outline perimeter shells, basically that's how many layers around the outside it will be. And I'll go over this a little bit in the 3D, the model preview. But outline direction, basically that just means that what's going to print first on that layer. And I have selected inside, so it's going to print the outside shell first, and then it's going to print whatever's on the inside, whether it's a full layer or infill. Haven't really used that one. I have used this one. Basically, VOS mode only prints the 1 layer all the way on the outside, even if it's a full model. So if you want a cylinder, you can take and get a cylinder, a solid piece of in an STL file, and then you can check this mode, and it will only print the outside layer and the bottom. And then it will force your top layer to be 0. Well, it's going to ask you if you want your 0. I've only done one print in that. It was okay. I mean, it works. I don't see the really big, you know, I print out a vase, and I mean, yeah, it was cool. So your first layer setting. So basically what this is for is to kind of ensure that your model sticks. First thing that I want to say about the first layer that sticks is I currently have a glass bed on mine, and these matter a lot in order to get your model to stick to that glass. I don't spray nothing on it. I don't use a glue stick. I don't use hairspray or anything. The only side note is when I first got my glass plate, it had a film on it that would never let anything stick. So I did one good layer of glue, of actually a wood glue / water mixture that I have a previous video on. Once I did that 1 or 2 times and then washed it off after a couple prints, it got any of that film that was left on that glass that would not allow it to stick. I had a lot of problem with that first off. But anyways, back to your first layer. Your first layer height, basically 100% would be this primary layer height. So at here, I'm actually telling the printer on my first layer, I want you to do a 0.09 millimeter height. So basically what that does is the printer pretends like it's doing this, but the nozzle height away from the bed is actually only 90% of it, which in return will push the filament down on the glass plate harder in hopes that it will stick better. Your first layer width, basically that's going to make it push out even more filament in order to make the width of the first layer of beads on your glass plate wider. So it gives it a larger surface area to stick for that first layer of printer. Not necessarily an overall model, just per width of the bead that's going down on the glass plate. So I've got a where 100% would be a normal first layer width of filament. I'm doing 1.5 times the layer width. First layer speed, basically if your overall speed is 100, if you was printing at 100 and you put 20% on your first layer, you would be printing at 20 millimeters per second. Haven't really messed with the start points. Let me close this out, and I'm going to go into the preview to kind of explain the top layers and the bottom layers and the outline perimeters. Prepare print. Alright, so let's go down here to the smaller part of the model. Alright, so okay, if you'll notice on these side parts here, how the model is done at the top. So we should have 5 layers down, and then the infield is going to start right in this area. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then this should be infill if I wasn't off. Yep, see how it had 5 layers right in this area. All right. Another thing that I want to note here is the 2 outside layers. If you'll notice, there's 1 layer here and 1 layer here. So that would be your outside layers. You see how it's got 2 layers in here? If I did 3, if you'll look here, we'll go back and change this to 3 layers. Okay, prepare to print. Now if you'll notice, there's 1, 2, 3 layers on the outside of the model. Alright, and then of course the bottom layer, if you'll notice, we had it at 4. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 layers, and then infill. Alright, so that's how your your top and bottom and outside layers work. Alright, back to the settings here. I know this video is probably going to be getting a little long. I'm trying to get through them as fast as possible. Additions, use skirts and brims. Basically, I'll show you the difference between a skirt and a brim. I mostly use brims. If you want to use a brim, this part has to be 0. Basically, it's going to put it right next to your model. And then this will be how many layers tall the brim is going to be. And this is going to be how many outlines it's going to be. Alright, and that's normally what I print, and I'll show you what that is. The brim basically prints this, you see this purple part here? That is your brim, and it connects to the bottom 3 layers. Now, you can put how many layers you want. I just find that 3 layers is pretty good. 3 layers tall, and then we have 8 beads out. So 3 layers and then 8 beads out. Basically what this does is really on the glass plate, I find out if I don't print a brim, which connects to the model and helps hold it down flat, if I don't print a brim, not every time, but I've just got to where I print a brim every time, because every once in a while I have a failed model because it raises off the bed on a small corner like up here or something like that. So I always print a brim for, I would say, 95% of my models, just to make sure that it doesn't come off the plate during the printing process, or it doesn't necessarily come off the plate, but a lot of times, like I said, the corner will raise up and it will be uneven. I've had them come off the plate too, depending on how small your model is. I've had a lot more success with my connection between the model and the glass plate by using a brim on all of my models. Alright, so that's the brim, which is under additions, is here. 3 layers high and then 8 beads out. You can do however many beads out you want to. It's up to you, and then you have to have this on 0. Now, if you want to do a skirt, basically they'll give you a pre-print that basically just gets your nozzle to flowing, but it doesn't connect to your model. So probably if I was going to do a skirt, then I would just do 1 layer high, because the whole point of a skirt is just to get the flow of your filament nice and good before you actually start the model. So let's see what a brim looks like. So you see how it is not connected to the model, but it is out to the side. Basically, it just gives you a little route all the way around your model in order to get a good flow of your filament. But, you know, I just connect it to the model. It makes the model stick better. So, you know, you would probably only do 1 line around the model. You wouldn't do 8. Let's go back. And so that's kind of the difference between a brim and a skirt. Raft. Some people use that to get the model to stick. You know, if you're going to do a very small part, that there's very little touching the glass plate, I would say that's a benefit of using a raft. The only other benefit that I've heard of using a raft is if the bottom of your model is round, and that's supposed to really help. Now, I don't really use rafts. I don't know a lot about the settings, but let's go in and look and see exactly what a raft looks like. So basically, a raft puts like you have your model floating on water, and that's basically why they call it a raft. Your glass plate is the water, then you have your raft, and then you have your model sitting on top of the raft. I will tell you this, rafts do make the bottom of your model look more unfinished, where you'll have that glass look if you have your model setting on the glass. But there is your rafts. I'm trying to go through this quicker because I know the video's getting long. Alright, so your infield. Of course, you know, the line overlap is supposed to be how much the percentage of it bonds to the inside of your model. I have left this at default at 35. It's been fine. These other percentages I've left. The only thing I really changed on infill is infill percentage. So 100, this would be 25% of the model. We've seen that. 25% of the infill. See how my infill is right here. It's only 25% of this space is filled with filament. If I wanted a more solid model, you know, and I put that at 100, let's get rid of the raft. 100% infill right here. Now my model is going to be full of filament. There's not going to be any space inside here that is open on my infill. So, you know, it depends on what you want. I mean, a good space to be, you know, just for a standard model, for nothing really specific, would probably be 20-25%. Infill can be different types. You know, you've got grid, triangular, wiggle, fast honeycomb, and full honeycomb. I feel like any one of these other ones here make my head on my printer have to move a lot more, and I'm trying to keep the wear and tear down on my printer. But I'll tell you, if I wanted to do one all the time that looks good, would be the full honeycomb, and that gives you a honeycomb type of infill. Once again, you can't see it. So, you know, the only if you use PETG, that kind of clear, you can see it. But other than that, you know, it may make the model stronger or not, but it creates a lot more wear and tear on your printer as it's going through the infill. It's having to do a lot of ups and downs. I mean, not left to right to try to print it. So normally, unless I want something specific, I use the this one. So you can play with them, see if you like them. They're all the same concept. The only thing is the honeycomb will do switch layers back and forth. Here I can kind of show you what that means. So we do one layer at a time, and it lays it lays this way, and then it lays this way, and it just crisscrossed where it does the full honeycomb on the full one. But like I said, I don't use them settings. I'm trying to get through these the ones that I mainly use, which is that one. Supports supports how much percentage of infill that you want on your supports. You know, I don't mess with a lot of these other settings except for support infill percentage. So if I did 40%, let's put some supports on here. I guess we can go over this support right here. Support type. Normal is going to do supports anywhere that it thinks that it needs supports at. And then from build plate only, will only make the supports come from the glass plate to the model. Support pillar resolution. Basically, the smaller you make this number, the smaller not necessarily the smaller your supports are, but the more detail that it tries to pick up from where it's putting models at. 45 degree, that's when it will start generating automatic supports. 45 is the default. You know, some printers can print with only 60 degrees, but if you'll notice, it pulls the supports in right there when I click that, which normally on this model it puts a few more supports. I don't know why it's because I didn't build plate only. Alright, go back to normal. Nope, didn't do that either. Well, I would add more supports than that. Let's see. That's the one benefit of Simplify3D. is you can modify your support. So here I would probably put some more supports, add, and then you can move, add as many supports as you want. Probably on this model, we can go here, clear all supports. We'll put it back to 4. And I know these supports are going to look bigger, but it doesn't necessarily make the support a different size. It just picks up less detail. You can remove supports, say I don't want that one there. If I want to add a support, I can add, more supports here, just like this. Let's put that around here. So you can add supports however you want. If there's one specific support you don't want, you can remove. Usually I'll start off with an auto and it'll give me a few supports to start with. Mainly I end up adjusting all my supports. I never accept the generated automatic supports. I just start off with that. But anyways, you can play with the supports. It's not really about how I do supports. This is just about the settings itself and how to go through it. Try to get your filament to print out correctly, your different types of filament. So if this is going to deal with how close your supports are going to be together. Probably should have picked a different model for this. Here, I got another model that will be good. Let's see. Let's go here. 3D printer. For my 3D printer here. This is the motor brackets. Alright, so let's pick this one here. Let me set this model down onto the base plate. Oh, come on, where you at? Here we go. Bam. Try to show you these supports and how this percentage works here. So, going up here to supports, we automatically generated supports. Done. Alright, so that done a pretty good job on getting my supports that I need. But what I'm going to want to show you here is on this particular number here. So we were at, I think the default is 30, so we're going to go back to 30. Prepare to print. And if we'll go down here and look, and you'll have to look at it to really see. See how close these support pillars are together right here. If you'll notice, when we change the percentage, they're going to be closer. Sports. Let's go up to, let's go 80. Bam. Prepare to print. Alright, now look at it. Look how much closer resolution that the supports are. The only caveat to that is the thicker you make this, the harder it's going to make these supports removed. And also will depend on your filament. PETG filament supports are a lot harder to remove than PLA. But PLA can print on a smaller percentage of filament infill. So if you notice, it goes wider. So that's all we're going to do on supports. Let's go back and get through the rest of these settings. Them are really the only ones I use on supports. If you want your default one that comes up here, then you would change your settings to here. None of these other settings I mess with other than this one and my default ones. Alright, temperature. Extruder temperature is obvious. If you want to set a different temperature, if you want to change this temperature, you just double click it, change that number. Whoops, I don't want to do 5 for sure on PLA. Let's see, 2.5. If I want to change temperature between layers, let's say I want to start off at 205, but on layer 6 I want to go back to 200. I'd put 6 here, and I've got 200 right there already. And then I'll click add set point, and now it's from layer 1 to layer 5, it's going to be 205, and then at layer 6 to the end of the print will be 200 Celsius through the rest of the print. Build plate. Starting at layer 1, I want my build plate to be at 60 Celsius. If I want it to go to it's not going to go to 200. If I wanted to go ahead and make it go down a little bit lower at layer 6. Whoops. At layer 6. Wanted to go down to 40 at layer 6. Add a set point. Now from layer 1 to layer 5, the build plate's going to be 60. And at 6 to the end of the model, it's going to be 40. Alright, so you've got to select between these two in order to change from different temperatures. That's the only setting that I mess with in here. Cooling is the same concept as the temperature. Layer 1 fan speed is going to be at 0. At layer 2, it's going to be 100%. And then if, say, I wanted at layer 6, I wanted to go to 60, fan speed 60%, I'll do that. If I want to change this, if I want to start off with 100, I can do that. If I don't, I just want the same from layer 1 to the end of the model, I can remove all of these. So the fan speed settings work just like the temperature settings. G code, I don't really do nothing in here. I've set to the defaults. Scripts, the only things that I've changed in scripts is starting script and ending script. I'm going to probably put these in the description below because the starting and end script from the automatic model configurator from Simplify3D was not anywhere where it needed to be. So I had to figure these out. I'm going to copy my starting and end script. I haven't done much with them. If anybody has any recommendations on starting and end script that I have, just let me know. Your default print speed, it's going to depend on what type of filament you're using. Of course, PLA, I normally stick to 60 max. I feel like it's less wear and tear on my printer. I've had it all the way up to 100, but it's just a lot more, it sounds pretty rough. So, I usually stick at about 60. That's probably the only one I adjust in here. Filament diameter should be right when you set the default, but you need to make sure it's 1.75 for the model price. You can play with your price per filament and all that stuff if you wanted to. I haven't messed with any of these other settings, but the main one is the print speed here. Advanced starting height and printing height. If you've watched any videos on Simplify3D, that's another advantage of it. You can do like layer 1 or at a certain height. It'd be nice if it did layers. But at 5 millimeters, you can have like a certain type of settings between the base and 5 millimeters every model, and a totally different type of settings between 5 millimeters and the rest of your model. I haven't really played a lot with this. I just kind of know what it is. The only one that I actually really play with is ooze control. Only retracts when crossing open spaces. Well, that's if this basically keeps from retracting while you're doing infill, when you go from infill spots. You don't care about stringing inside your model because you can't see it. So you would check this that way to keep your retraction movements down, so you don't retract every time it goes over an open space. Force retraction between layers. That does exactly what it says. Is when that one layer is done, it will force a traction movement, whether it's going over open space or not. Minimum travel for retraction, that says how far does it have to travel over open space before it decides to do a retraction movement. Perform retraction during a wipe movement. That's back to this movement here, wipe distance. Like I said, I'm still a little vague on these, but I know these are supposed to help, so I leave them checked. only wipe extruder on the outmost perimeters. That also is a wipe movement, meaning that, you know, I don't need any ooze control with inside my model, because I don't really care what it looks like. So this is going to restrict the wipe movements to only the outside of the model, because that's when I need it, because I don't want stringing that I'm going to see on the end. This one, movement behavior, is avoid crossing outlines for traveling movements. Basically, if it will try to go around the model in order to not go over open space. So if I don't like from here to here, depending on my settings, it will not go from here to here. If I have that checked, it will force the if it's not already printing like that. If it says, hey, I want you to go from here to here, it will say, hold on, we have this setting that tells us we need to go from all the way around here before we start printing here. So that just kind of makes it avoid going from here to here if all possible. So that is what that particular movement behavior is. And then of course this is going to be the maximum allowed detour, which is 10 millimeters. So if it's going to have to go 20 millimeters outside of its normal movement, it's not going to do it because of the setting. And to be quite honest with you, that is the majority of the settings that I have messed with and figured out what they do. I hope this video has been helpful. I know it may have been a little bit long and I've rambled through some of it, but you know, I'm just trying to give the best perception of what these settings do in Simplify3D. Now, you may be able to take these and figure out what is what in Cura and use these settings. Well, this video is not about settings. This video is about what each setting does, and then we're going to go over the settings for the different filaments in a future video. So thank you very much for watching. Please leave some comments below to help me in the future maybe make this video, redo this video and make this video better. I sure hope this has been helpful. Thank you very much.